Did you know that France has dense forests and wild mountains where mysterious and fascinating creatures live that you have never seen before? Have you ever thought about meeting a gray wolf face to face or discovering the secret of the Pyrenean black bees? And how about discovering which animals are the true kings of the French forests? Get ready to dive into the wild side of France, where every tree and every river hides incredible stories and mysteries that will leave your jaw dropping. Want to know more? Stay with me until the end and you will be surprised. Look, I'm going to tell you something about the national parks and nature reserves in France and, honestly, it's a unique experience. For example, Vanoise National Park, there in the Alps, is a real spectacle. The place is famous for its marmot populations. If you're lucky, you might even spot these animals in their natural habitat. It's a breathtaking setting, with snow-capped mountains and green valleys. In addition to being a great destination for those who enjoy ecotourism, these parks are essential for the conservation of biodiversity. They act as refuges for various species and are study areas for scientists seeking to better understand ecosystems. Another park that left me enchanted was the Cévennes National Park. You know that place where you feel part of nature? This park is home to species such as the European lynx and the golden eagle. I myself have never seen a lynx up close, but just knowing that they are there, living freely, gives me a feeling of hope. The conservation of these areas is crucial, not only for the animals, but for us too. It's a constant reminder that we need to take care of our planet. And best of all, these parks offer several possibilities for outdoor activities, from hiking to bird watching, which is great for those who want to disconnect from the hustle and bustle of everyday life and reconnect with nature. Scientists from various parts of the world come to France to study these ecosystems. They collect important data on flora and fauna, monitor animal populations and develop conservation strategies. It's work that we often don't see, but it is essential to ensure that these areas continue to exist. Furthermore, the ecotourism generated by these parks also brings economic benefits to local communities, creating a win-win relationship. So, when you're planning your next trip, think about including one of these parks in your itinerary. I guarantee you won't regret it. Now, if we talk about emblematic species and conservation efforts in France, there is a lot of story to tell. One example is the European wolf. These animals almost became extinct in the region, but, fortunately, they are slowly returning to the Alps and Pyrenees. Of course, this reintroduction is not a simple process. It involves constant monitoring, impact studies and, often, dealing with resistance from some local communities. But it's inspiring to see how these efforts are bearing fruit. I myself have heard a wolf howl during a night hike in the Alps and it was an unforgettable experience. Knowing that they are there, returning to occupy their space, is a sign that nature has an incredible capacity to regenerate itself, as long as we allow it. So, guys, have you ever stopped to think about how many incredible species we still haven't discovered in France? So leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And let's continue because I'm sure you've never heard about what I left for the end. What about the brown bear in the Pyrenees? This is another fascinating example. These bears are critically endangered and France has invested heavily in reintroduction and monitoring programs. There is a lot of work involved, from capturing specimens from other regions to adapting them to the new habitat. When I visited the Pyrenees, I always hoped to see one of these bears, but they are very discreet. Either way, knowing that there are ongoing efforts to save this species is comforting. And that's not all, the presence of these large predators is an indication that the ecosystem is healthy, because they are at the top of the food chain. And we can't forget the migratory birds. The Camargue, for example, is a vital spot for several species of water birds, including the famous flamingos. I had the opportunity to visit the region, and it is a sight to see these birds in large flocks, especially during sunset. France has a crucial role in protecting these animals, because many of these birds make long migratory journeys and need safe stopping points. The conservation of these habitats is not just a local issue, but a global one. And this is where the importance of international collaboration comes in. Countries need to work together to ensure these birds have somewhere to rest and feed during their migrations. Look, it's not easy to keep wildlife protected in a world that is constantly developing. Habitat fragmentation is a serious problem in France. With urban and agricultural expansion, many animals lose their homes or become isolated in small areas, which makes reproduction and the search for food difficult. I've seen areas that were once open fields and forests turn into residential neighborhoods and plantations. It's sad, but it's reality. And that's not all, pollution also works against it. Contaminated rivers and lakes, degraded soils, all of this directly affects local flora and fauna. And there's also climate change. These are a separate chapter. The climate is changing, and this directly affects ecosystems. Species that were well adapted to certain conditions now face challenges in surviving. I myself have noticed changes in the behavior of some birds that used to migrate and are now staying longer or even not migrating anymore. It's a clear sign that something is out of place. Global warming is not just a question of temperature, but of an entire balance that is being altered. And this impacts not only animals, but us too. Fortunately, there are many people working to mitigate these impacts. Governmental and non-governmental organizations are on the front line, creating conservation policies, establishing ecological corridors, and promoting environmental education initiatives. I have already participated in some of these initiatives, and I can say that they make a difference. Ecological corridors, for example, are areas that connect fragmented habitats, allowing animals to move more safely. And environmental education is crucial, because the more people understand the importance of conservation, the more chances we have of protecting our planet. International collaboration is also key, especially when it comes to migratory species and ecosystems that cross borders. It is a continuous and collective effort, but it is very worth it. So when you think about wildlife in France, remember that behind every park, every protected species, and every conservation initiative, there is a huge and ongoing effort to maintain this balance. It's not easy, but it's possible. And each of us can do our part, whether by visiting these parks, supporting conservation organizations, or simply spreading the word about the importance of protecting nature. After all, wildlife is a heritage that we all share and have a responsibility to preserve. And you know what impresses me most? The resilience of nature. Even with all the challenges, wildlife in France finds ways to adapt and survive. It is as if nature has an internal force that, despite everything, seeks a way to regenerate itself. I remember one time I went to Mercantour National Park, which is also in the Alps. It's a simply stunning place. There, you can find a great diversity of flora and fauna. And look, I will never forget the day I saw a golden eagle flying over the park. It's one of those moments when you feel the grandeur of nature and realize how essential it is to our existence. But what makes me really hopeful are the conservation initiatives that are being implemented. For example, when we talk about ecological corridors, we are not talking about something abstract. I've seen up close how these corridors work. They are basically strips of land that connect isolated green areas, allowing animals to move freely between these areas. This is crucial for the survival of many species, which depend on large territories to hunt, reproduce, and find shelter. And this not only benefits animals, but also plants, which can spread and diversify genetically. Hunting and fishing are also complicated issues. In France, despite strict laws regulating these activities, illegal hunting is still a problem. Some rural residents see hunting as part of their culture and tradition. It's a dilemma, because, at the same time as you understand the cultural value, you know that you need to find a balance so as not to compromise biodiversity. Fishing, on the other hand, also has its impacts. Marine species are being overexploited and many marine ecosystems are under threat. What gives me a little hope are the marine protected areas that have been created. They function as sanctuaries where marine life can recover and thrive. And speaking of water, the pollution of rivers and lakes is a problem that cannot be ignored. Rivers like the Seine, which runs through Paris, have already suffered a lot from industrial and urban pollution. But fortunately, there have been efforts to clean these water bodies. I myself have participated in cleaning efforts, and it is gratifying to see the positive impact that these actions can have. Furthermore, the implementation of more sustainable technologies in industries and the adequate treatment of urban waste have helped to improve water quality. And this not only benefits humans, but also the aquatic life that depends on these habitats. And it's not just wildlife that benefits from these conservation actions. Local communities also have a lot to gain. Ecotourism, for example, is an important source of income for many regions. When you visit a national park or nature reserve, you are contributing to the local economy. This creates a virtuous cycle, where nature conservation and economic development go hand in hand. I've already spoken to small business owners who make a living from ecological tourism, and they always emphasize how preserving the environment is fundamental to their livelihood. So by protecting wildlife, we are also helping to create a more sustainable future for everyone. And when it comes to climate change, things are even more complex. Changes in climate directly affect habitats and the species that live in them. I've seen grasslands that used to be green and lush turn into dry, arid areas because of changes in rainfall patterns. This affects not only the animals, but also the farmers who depend on these lands for their livelihoods. Climate change is a reality that we cannot ignore, and we need to act now to mitigate its effects. This involves everything from reducing greenhouse gas emissions to implementing more sustainable agricultural practices. Wildlife knows no borders and, therefore, cooperation between countries is essential. France has actively participated in international agreements and initiatives for the conservation of biodiversity. And this is essential, especially when it comes to migratory species, which depend on multiple habitats along their migration routes. I've had the opportunity to attend international conservation conferences, and it's inspiring to see how people from different parts of the world are united by a common goal. The exchange of experiences and knowledge is enriching and strengthens conservation efforts at a global level. So when you think about wildlife in France, remember that there is tireless and passionate work behind every park, every protected species and every conservation initiative. And this work is done by people who believe that a better future is possible, where humans and nature can coexist harmoniously. And you know, I believe that too. I believe that, with effort and dedication, we can make a difference. And each of us has a role to play in this journey. If everyone does their part, no matter how small, we will be contributing to a more sustainable and balanced world. Just imagine how many mysteries are still hidden in the dense forests and winding rivers. And what about the Alps, with their stunning landscapes and creatures adapted to the most extreme climates? But wait a minute. Before we say goodbye, I have some intriguing questions for you to ponder. Have you ever thought about how wildlife in France adapts to climate change? Are there species that are already preparing for these transformations? And speaking of adaptations, what would be the most surprising ability a wild animal could develop? What if I told you that there are reported sightings of creatures that seem straight out of ancient legends? Are we talking about something real or just myths passed down from generation to generation? Who knows, in a next adventure, we can uncover more secrets of this fascinating and mysterious universe. Have you ever had the opportunity to explore any wild areas in France? If so, share your experiences in the comments. We want to know if you have already encountered something out of the ordinary or if you have curious stories to tell. Oh, and if you could choose one place in France to explore in depth, what would it be? The majestic forest of Fontainebleau? The mysterious caves of Lascaux? Or perhaps the vast landscapes of Mercantour National Park? Leave your comment and let's imagine these incredible journeys together. Speaking of which, do you think it would be possible that some previously unknown animal is secretly living in some remote corner of France? And if so, what do you imagine he would be like? Big, small, with camouflaged abilities, or perhaps something completely out of the ordinary? While you are thinking about these questions, we have already started planning our next meeting. Who knows, maybe we'll discover more fascinating facts about wildlife in other corners of the world together. And, of course, don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss any news. So, until next time, everyone. Stay tuned and keep exploring this incredible world full of mysteries and surprises.